Alright.
Hi. Callum, would you like to introduce yourself?
How you doing, mate?
I'm good.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, sure. My name's Callum, and I am a youth and community worker. I've been doing that for about 6 years now. I started my career in Glasgow, and worked up there for about 4 years. And then I've recently moved back to West London, where I'm from, where I grew up. And I do youth and community work in Albert Grove. I'm from Shepherd's Bush, which is just down the road from where I work. And I've been back home for about 10 months now. Yeah.
Nice. My name is Francis. Everyone calls me Frank. Originally from South London. I've been mentoring youth, young adults for a better part of like 10 years now. Yeah. How did you get into it?
I got into it. It's a long story. It's an interesting story. I was up in Glasgow. I was doing a degree in sociology.
Yeah.
Which I was enjoying and I was interested in, but I hadn't always necessarily planned on going to uni. I haven't got the most kind of academically wired brain, and I think the thing that I liked about sociology was I'm interested in people, but I think specifically I'm interested in groups of people, subcultures, things like that. Why people behave in certain ways, particularly in maybe more extreme forms.
Mm-hmm.
And around the time I would have been 20, I received some news that a friend of mine, someone I'd grown up with, his younger brother had been stabbed, and very, very nearly killed. He'd had his lung punctured.
That was in London?
That was in London.
Yeah.
And I came home, it was just before Christmas, or it was just after Christmas, somewhere around the winter time. I came home and I linked up with him, and we hadn't seen each other in a long time.
Yeah.
And our paths had gone very different ways. I had kind of stability and some privileges, financial privileges, soft privileges, where he didn't. And he'd become involved in difficult things.
Yeah.
And his younger brother had done to an extent, but he wasn't what you describe as gang affiliated. It was a very unfortunate situation that he didn't deserve at all. And I remember touching base with him and really reflecting on the fact of how different our lives were at that time. I was up in uni, making new friends, experiencing a new city, partying, having a good time, and he'd been there grafting for many years, and he'd nearly just lost his brother.
Yeah.
And whereas when we were younger, he was always much more naturally talented than me, much better looking than me, all these things, and yet here we are. And I was really, really sitting on that. Anyway, his mother and my mother decided to write an article.
Yeah.
I can't remember which paper it was in, but it was like, kind of a letter to London from a mother type thing. And my mum works in journalism, so she kind of helped her, get her thoughts across on it. Anyway, a woman in Glasgow read the article, and messaged my mum on Twitter and said, I grew up in Glasgow in the 90s, early 2000s, when we were the murder capital of Europe, and I think it would be really interesting for you to come up here and see how things have turned around. So my mum came up and then ended up writing a spread about Glasgow, the Glasgow initiative, how they turned things around in terms of their rates of homicides, knife crime. And she went along to interview a guy who ran a youth organisation in the East End, and she said, "Do you want to tag along with me?" And I did, and that man ended up being my boss. After that conversation, he said, "Do you want to come and work for us?" Literally there and that day, and that is where my career started. And so that was the start of 4 years doing youth work in Glasgow, in 2 different areas, one in the East End, one in the Northwest. And my main kind of speciality within that was to do with young people sort of involved in serious youth violence, falling under the radar, through the net, however you want to put it. And now I'm back in London and doing the same thing. Yeah.
Did you think anything from your like real life experience, just living day to day, did that kind of translate to actually helping or making you kind of connect with some of these young individuals?
100%. I mean, I think probably as well as I do that you have to be a bit mad to do what we do. And usually, and this is my own personal experience, most of the people that I've met who put as much into this line of work as I do have had some significant traumas. Have maybe had periods of their lives themselves when they've been just involved in some of the more extreme sides of reality, whatever that may be. And so for myself, as I said earlier, I had a lot of support growing up. I wasn't gangbanging. I wasn't doing any of that. But I grew up in West London, in Shepherd's Bush, as I said, which is very, very diverse. And so you're always surrounded by that, and you know people who are involved in that, and then
it's on your doorstep.
It's on your doorstep, and then people that are very much not, and that's one of the unique things about West London. I think probably a defining point for myself was when I was 16 years old. My sister took her own life. And that completely changed the trajectory of my life, and sent me on a path of, some pretty intense self-destruction for many years, and made me experience, how bad life can get. And again, because of a lot of the support I had, I'm still here. I'm not on the end of a pipe. I've not been put on the end of a blade. And I think that with myself, I have such a unique background and upbringing in many, many ways that I feel like I have a lot to give to youngsters who don't have the perspectives I have, but fundamentally I understand pain. And I think
that's a universal.
100%.
I think that's the
100%.
The one thing about life, you live, you're gonna experience some sort of
exactly. And I think again, with youth workers, community workers, mentors, we all have different roles. We all have different skills, and you don't have to have experienced extreme pain to be good at it. But
I think it helps.
It helps, and I think with the young people that I work with, I feel comfortable around them, and I hope they feel comfortable around me, and that's where the kind of basis of our relationship.
I think they would be after some sort of like a sense of authenticity from you as a person. You don't have to have walked the same road, but I think there's something you can almost sense.
Definitely.
That we've been through you've been through something and I've been through something. You can kind of not bond, but we can kind of relate in some sort of way.
Definitely.
I don't think it has to be they sell drugs or I've got passing selling. It has to be there has to be some sort of bonding group,
shared,
sort of shared.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think even, not to open up too much, but you see your sister passing the way she did. You know, that's a pain that I guess, you know, no one experienced, but it must have given you some, like a different perspective on, like a different outlook on how things can be or how things are.
100%. It's obviously it's a complex death, suicide, for many reasons, culturally, emotionally, spiritually, however you wanna look at it. But I think it definitely, I know where it can go. I know where it can go with my young people. I know where it can go with adults, and I've been there. I've seen it. I felt it. So that's it, in some ways, like, and again, I know you'll know this as well in different contexts, but if you've been broken to a certain degree through something, you know, you build a resilience and a steel where nothing shocks you, but it also drives you to try and prevent certain things from repeating themselves. So you can delve into darkness with a comfortability that other people just can't handle. And that's a great skill. That's a great power. And truth be told, I'm extremely grateful for that. And you know, you play with the cards you're dealt, don't you? So 100%, you're right. Yeah.
And what would you say the difference is with working in Scotland and coming down to West London? Or is there not a difference?
No, there's some things that remain the same. You know, just same story, different place. Same cycles. I think some of the fundamental differences are cultural and demographic. In Scotland, the vast majority of my young people were white. And it's it's no longer the murder capital of Europe, it is the drug death capital of Europe. So consumption is intense up there, and I remember when I moved up there, people would say like, oh, you know, like they really get on it up there, and I remember thinking, you know, I'm a white English male, like what am I going to see up there that I haven't seen and experienced myself. And you know, they I mean, there's a systemic issue for it. I think with Glasgow, the kind of setting you have is one of it: intense deindustrialisation. Thatcher ripped it apart. Shipbuilding was their main trade, and it was the backbone of Glasgow. Areas like Govan, the Govan Docks, and an area where I worked, Yoker and Clydebank. That's where I spent most of my time. Were all shipbuilding communities, and there's a museum in Clydebank, which is in an area where I worked for a long time, and you see these pictures from several decades ago of the workers going in to work, and there is just hundreds of them. And these were the whole communities, and it's gone, and to be replaced with nothing. Fast forward to when that's happening, to the 80s and 90s, you have the introduction of heroin. Just sweeps through Glasgow as it did with Liverpool, all these the industrialising places, port cities, and so you have intense generational trauma there in these communities. So with my young people, you know, I was frequently coming across young people who were starting to drink, smoke cannabis at 10, 11 years old. Maybe by 13, 14, they're now taking cocaine, ecstasy, you know, you name it. Valium, street Valium is a huge issue there. And obviously mixing all of these concoctions together, alcohol, Valium, cocaine, so it's sort of classic mix. So a lot of the violence and social issues were consumption fueled. And within these areas, the poverty was intense. Life expectancy in the 50s, in some of these areas. You know, and so like opportunity, even illicit opportunity.
Can we
yeah,
touch
sorry.
on that for a second?
Sorry.
You said life expectancy in the 50s.
In the 50s,
But
yeah.
that was in, what year was that?
Currently.
Current year, which is astonishing.
Astonishing.
Yeah.
Astonishing. And you know, even with like opportunities, you have like illicit opportunities would be very, very complex there as well, because in London, and I'll come to London in a second, if you want to start selling drugs and build up your own line, and you're smart and you have good resources, and particularly if you live in a mixed area, you can go out on the streets, you can meet customers pretty easily, get yourself little business cards. If you live in London, I'm sure you will have been offered one, and you can build up your line without stepping on anyone's toes, because there's a lot of money in London. There's a lot of people who want to buy drugs. A lot of those people are just wanting to buy cocaine, MDMA. They're out to have a good time. Whereas if you live in a community in Glasgow, this very insular. In my experience, they're usually run by a kind of family setup. So it feels a bit more like kind of old school mafia. So you hear these family names. So in areas where I worked, there was a family, and they ran the show there. So they were sort of mid-level distributors. So if you wanted to sell, the market is for harder drugs: heroin, crack, Valium. There's a lot of tick basis, so borrowing basis. Yeah. So you have to deal with all of that, and you have to chase up that money. You usually have to do that through violence, and people will hear about what you're doing very, very quickly, and they will either tell you that you're in debt and recruit you, or they'll come through your door, they'll come through your mother's door, you name it. So even illicit opportunities are stifled there. And so it's a tough place. But one thing I will say about Glasgow is it completely made me in terms of who I am as a professional, as a youth worker, as a community worker.
So where you cut your teeth.
It's where I cut my teeth, and I've given some pretty bleak headlines about it as a place, but unbelievable resilience as a place, extremely welcoming. I always got asked the question, do they mind that you're English? I never had a single issue with that. As long as you carry yourself with respect, you get nothing but that back. And I owe everything to that city in terms of who I've become as a youth and community worker. So big shout out to the west coast of Scotland, definitely. In regards to then coming back down to London, you have a completely different landscape. The majority of young people I work with now within West London are Muslim.
Yeah.
You have big Muslim communities, Ladbroke Grove, Shepherd's Bush, everywhere, and they don't drink, and they don't take street Valium, and they don't take cocaine. They'll sell it, but they don't touch it. And they are also living in some of the wealthiest areas in Britain by GDP.
Yeah.
They are obviously not the holders of that wealth, but it's on their doorstep. So the opportunities, illicit ones, are massive.
Yeah.
Massive. And one of the biggest challenges I have with my young people in London is that a lot of them have seen some serious fast money at a very young age, and that has corrupted their minds. If you have successfully done a robbery for a Rolex, for a Range Rover, and you've seen 10, 15 grand cash at 15 years old, you have zero interest in an apprenticeship. You have zero interest in a school system that's already rejected you. If you're in a pupil referral unit, which most of them are, you are completely tapped out of wanting any kind of education, feeling accepted by any kind of education. And there is money all around you. There is money in your face, constantly. So my young people in London are driven financially. Their actions aren't clouded nearly as much by intoxication, but I would say they are clouded by status and the desire for serious wealth very quickly.
Type of intoxication.
100%.
Yeah. And how touching on the point of so some of the young men, boys that you mentor, who can go out and make 10 grand, 15 grand, or 5 grand, whatever it is, quite quickly. What do you realistically say to them that, hey, I can, if we take that out the space, what do you put in that realistically says, okay, you can now stop doing this and come and do something that's tangible, something that's actually real,
100%.
to make a decent living or start to be aspiration like your career or things like that nature?
It's a question that I think about every single day. And I want to be able to sit here and say, this is the answer. This is what I do. But it's very different depending on the individual. I always kind of categorize my young people based in my mentally, based on certain factors, their risk factor, their ability to self-reflect, if they've located a passion, their ability to be an individual without being afraid. Things like that are what you're dealing with in terms of how you maneuver someone. So if you have a young person with a clear passion, jackpot. Because you don't have to try and find it with them. So the kind of obvious ones being football, music, and there's plenty of them. I work with young people who are seriously talented footballers, but again, they haven't quite stayed on that track.
Yeah.
But as long as that is there, that talent and that passion for it, that is what I hammer. Same with music. Those are your kind of, they're not easy by any stretch, but if it's there, you target it.
Would it help putting things up? Because let's say if they're young, are they not musically inclined or they're not football inclined?
Yeah.
What? I don't know, they've got that business mindset. Let's say it's not the same, but it's similar. You are selling a product. So you're like a small business owner, let's just say, but the product you're selling is an illicit product. What, like, is there something you could put in terms of, instead of selling this thing here, sell something that you can sell forever, or
Totally.
sell something you can sell and scale up without your door being kicked in, or
Totally.
spending a night in a cell for the next, every couple of weeks, because it is difficult. We can only have but so many footballers.
We can.
And so many musicians.
And it's also, it's such a, it's a cliche. You know what I mean? Like it's, and unfortunately it's a cliche that as I've just said there, like I'm looking for a lot because, as I said, that's a jackpot one. But there are so many footballers and musicians.
Yeah, because sometimes I do struggle with that because I don't think the world needs any more footballers.
It doesn't.
And the world doesn't need any more musicians.
No.
We have enough, but there's.
But particularly with young people of colour and of like immigrant backgrounds from like inner city areas in London, we've got we're getting plenty of those, and they're all getting pushed for the same thing. So I
think there needs to be either some conversation with like corporate businesses,
definitely,
even skill work. Like I think my thing is if you can explain or someone break down how much, because people work on a monetary level. So you say, look, if I can break down to you how much a plumber would make or an electrician would make, monthly, yearly, this is how much they would make. You are making this every month, every year, However, it comes with these risks, these problems, this life expectancy, this freedom expectancy is quite short.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You might be great for a year or two, and then spend the next 5 years in prison. Whereas you're a plumber, you're an electrician, you've got a trade, you can always scale that up and always scale that up and always scale that up. Because it's all well and good having a talent, being a footballer or being a musician. But as we know, in that type of industry, talent is not enough.
No.
There's always these odd intangibles that maybe you just don't have. You can be as talented as you want, but if you're not popular, or if you're not seen, if you don't have maybe a particular story that comes with your music, then you might not have an interested public to buy into it. But if you're a plumber, you're a plumber. Someone's water, gas leaks. You know how to work, fix gas and boilers. You can go and fix a gas and boiler. You charge them money, go home. That's it.
And I think with that one as well, it's convincing these young people that they don't necessarily have to be that guy. You don't need to be seen. Your value isn't based on your reputation of I do X, Y, Z or this. And one thing I've certainly found, and again this is just in my experience, was that my white young people in Glasgow, we used to power them into apprenticeships, and they were up for it. They were much more receptive to it. And I think there's still a perception amongst non-young white people within London, generally, not totally, that apprenticeships for the geezers and and I'm often trying to convince them this is a serious trade.
I think the disconnect sometimes is, I think they are pushed into the lane of music or football.
Yeah, totally they're pushed,
and they don't see or don't hear about enough.
Yeah,
let's say successful tradesmen who are black, who are Indian, who are from a certain religious background, that they can say, look, this is what I do. This is how much I make.
Yeah.
And I live a relatively good life in London. I can purchase houses. I can start my own businesses with the money that I make. And I think that's one of the disconnects which I try to do, because fortunately for me, I have friends who are actually in the trade and they do very well. So I can speak to them and say, hey, look, there's a young man or there's a group of guys, can you come in and speak to them and show them there is life outside of being, because it's such a fickle thing. This football dream and this music dream. And I think what happens is, because a lot of these young people, and even us in general as people, we now live through a lens of Instagram.
Yeah.
So you see what you want to see.
Yeah.
So if you constantly see musicians, this guy's driving a lamp, okay, I want to do music. If you see footballers, okay, I want to be a footballer. But it's such a tiny percentage of people actually who are there's a lot of people who want to play football. A lot of people have talent to play football. But there's a very small percentage of people who actually get to play football at the highest level, and not even just that, stay there for 5 years.
Yeah.
It could be like 3 years and you're done. It could be 4 years and you're done. If you have a business.
And I think as well, to go into the social media stuff, which has completely changed the game, and this generation are having to navigate things that we just can't even conceptualize yet. There's very much I don't even want to people talk about the rise of Andrew Tate all the time, and I don't really want to focus on that too much, because he is an influence, but he's just one influence, and there's a bigger picture. But what he does preach about, which several others do as well, he's just the most famous one, is if you're doing a 9 to 5, you're locked in the matrix, and you need to be your own boss. And for them, with what is around them and the tools that they have at that time, that means illicit money.
Yeah.
That's it. Because they're not getting the opportunities or seeing it, and the own bosses that they are seeing around them are drug dealers, are all these things. So that combination of of that message coming out is hugely influential for them. And young people in London who are hungry for money, like that's your reputation. Your reputation is your wealth at that point in your life, right?
Yeah.
I just to quickly like go back on one of the things you were talking about, breaking down finances. I built a session, developed a session that I call Fast Money, Slow Money, and what I do is I sit a group down, whoever it is, or I'll do it with an individual, and I break down the finances of them running a drug line for 6 months, and I give them these kind of parameters of the scenario where I say, okay, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say you build a successful drug line selling crack and heroin for 6 months. Before I do that, I go through, okay, but how do you think you get there, first of all? So let's say you build a drug line where you make £2 profit a week. How do you think you get there? How do you develop your customers? Where are you getting them? Are you doing county lines? All of these things meticulously, and I make them go through the finances of it. So every single thing, even to buying the Nokia phone and the Leica SIM and all of it. And then I give them their 6 months, and I get them to add up their profits, and I ask them what they're going to spend it on, and they get really excited. And I ask them the questions down to the how much does an ounce of crack cost? What are you breaking it down into? How are you selling it? And they love it. Every single time they get really excited about it because they imagine this little dream that they're already having. And then I tell them you get arrested, and you get 7 years, and you serve 3.5. And I get them to break down the money that they've made and the money that they've saved, because before I tell them this is going to happen, I ask them, what are you going to spend on? Of course, they've spent all the money on financing a Merc, on the Montclair, on their, dream girl, and, getting her BBL and all these things that they're consuming constantly. And the stuff they come out with is crazy. And then I get them to break down what they have left, what they've earned, and how much over then the 3.5 years plus the 6 months, so 4 years, they make a week. And it's nothing. And it blows their mind. And then is the perfect time to introduce, this is what happens if you can get a trade. This is what happens if you can get a skill.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to earn poor money at the beginning, but you can be your own boss. You don't have to do this 9 to 5, blah, 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 blah. You can go out on jobs when you want them. The more jobs you go on, the more money you make, and you'll get into it. But you can make serious money as a tradesman, and there is a lack of them at the minute. So that is a way, an answer to your kind of previous question, that I try and grab them. Is you talk money to them, you break it down to them, and you go, this, like... Because
the thing is that I guess that human nature is we always overestimate ourselves.
Yeah.
So we overestimate how smart we are. So as much as how smart we are, how good looking we are, how quick witted we are. So as much as a 17-year-old or 18-year-old, 21-year-old young man is gonna sit down and go through the costs, he's gonna think, okay, cool, he's I'm gonna get nicked, get arrested, go to jail.
Always.
But it's always gonna be.
It's always a response. I would not be though.
Yeah.
I'm smart.
And I think that's
smart.
And that's what
Every
everybody.
time.
That's what every young man thinks. I'm smarter than the average girl. I am. I'm going to be the Pablo Escobar of this thing. Do you know what I mean? And it's going to work. And the dream's going to be alive. It's going to be real, and I can touch it. So I think it's so. That's one of the things I struggle with sometimes, because it is difficult trying to. I almost sometimes don't even like to speak to them about these sort of things, because I think about myself and how I was at that age, and if I'm hand on heart, honestly, I'm not going to listen to anybody. No matter, you could sit down and talk to me, go in one day and come out the other, because I'm smarter than everybody here. I'm the smartest person here. You haven't met anyone like me before. I'm super smart. Whatever happened to him, because he's an idiot. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes even trying to speak to them, it's difficult. It's almost like you just need something they can actually touch and feel and see. Like, look,
100%.
this is real. This is tangible.
Yeah.
And if I take this away and just leave you with words and calculations, it's great in the moment. But when I leave this room, I'm going out just doing what I'm doing, and you're not gonna know, or I'm not gonna know.
And I think one of the hardest things about that as well is, you know, with certain young people that they are gonna have to.
Yeah.
Fate has its plans.
Yeah.
And you have to work around fate. You have to try and build a framework around fate, where you consistently provide them with tools. You give them the same message. You let them know this is going to happen to you.
Yeah.
And when it happens, God forbid, you're there to say.
Yeah.
And that's in my experience, some of the most powerful breakthroughs I've had is when I've given a young person a prediction, it's happened, and they've come back to me and I've said, I told you.
Yeah.
So, and then something in their brain, sometimes it doesn't, but then something in their brain can go, he's seeing something here. And he knows how this is going to play out.
Well, I think it's just that general thing of, you know, we're fortunate to just being able to breathe longer than they have, you know, just by sheer dint of age, that's all. You know, I think sometimes, like I always say, we always overestimate. And when I started mentoring, you know, I started from a different position. I started because I had lived a life previously which is not too dissimilar to a lot of the young people I encountered. And I'd spend a lot of my years kind of taken out of the community, you know, and I wanted to put back into the community because I could see what was happening and the effects was having on these young people. And it's difficult to sit down and tell them, don't do this. Because I just don't say, oh, but you done. How are you going to tell me not to do something you've done? So I just said, all right, cool. If you are going to do it, I can't stop you. I can't lock you in a room. All I can do is just give you the reality of the situation. Don't get me wrong. You could be the savant of this thing. You could be the drug dealing, you know, Albert Einstein of this thing. You'd be a genius and make it. You could be, but statistically, you're probably not going to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you a bit of space and a bit of room to do what you're doing, but I'm here. I'm here. If you need anything, I'm here. If there's anything you want to do away from that, I'm also here. You know, I was very fortunate in a sense where I wasn't drawn into a gang. I was able to kind of traverse that, you know, and do my own thing, which is a blessing and a curse in itself, you know, because I had a lot of freedom, which a lot of these young kids don't have. They don't go travel around London, so they stay in their own borough. And I travelled around, so I had friends in East London, West London, South London, all over the place, which again was a blessing and a curse. But for me, I think just giving them space, knowing that they are going to crash. They are going to crash. They're going to crash. They're going to get arrested, get stabbed. Unfortunately, some of them might even die. You have to kind of, you can't prep yourself for that, but you have to kind of know that is a reality, you know. Because I walked into this kind of blind. I thought, oh, you know, I'm going to be like Nelson Mandela. I'm going to just save everybody and it's going to be brilliant. And I had to stop myself. So I realised I was doing it for selfish reasons, not for the selfless intent I actually gone in there. I was actually doing it for my own sense of ego or gratification. Or look at me, look what I'm doing. And after you get burnt a few times and you lose some of these young people, or they kind of drift away and you hear that, you know, some of them are, you know, doing 10, 15 years, or some of them are in a mental institution, and some of them are even, like, they passed away. So I realised this ain't about you, it has to be about them. So I almost have to like listen to them rather than me speak to them. I have to listen to them and listen some more. And then I start to learn from them what they need from me, rather than me tell them what I think they want from me. Because like I said, I think of myself when I was their age, I was very, very hard-headed. Mm-hmm. And there's not many people that could have got through to me. I don't think anybody could have got through to me because I was intent, I was hell-bent on doing this thing. And it's not like
It's not a situation where someone said, "Hey, come and do this for me." I was hell bent on doing what I was going to do. No one said, "Oh, look, you have to do it," or "I'm gonna make you do it." I knew, looking outside my bedroom window, I was like, "Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do there." Do you know what I mean? So I think those are the kids, myself, they're the ones that I think need to be reached the most.
100%.
So I think there's some that you can always pick off.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's the ones that are hardcore that are going to influence
Yeah.
the 10 or 15, because that one is a bit, that one is kind of wavering.
Yeah.
He's going to influence himself.
Yeah.
He's an easy catch, you can fish him in easily. But the other one that influences the 10 or 15,
Yeah.
if you get 3 of them, that's 15 here, 15 here.
It's a problem.
Here. Yeah.
Yeah. When you reflect like back on your life, Frank, like, how do you see it now? Do you see that as a different person entirely?
Yeah, I look back. I've lived like, it's odd. I'm 42, 43. I can't keep up my age, but I've lived like many different lives as myself, and looking back, there's versions of myself I do not recognize. It's almost like I don't know. There's, when you meet people who speak different languages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to speak. I lost my mother tongue, but if you speak French at home with your mother, and then English at school with your friends, you're two different people.
Yeah.
You're two different people speaking two different languages. You become a different person. Your body changes, the way you stand changes, and that's how I feel with myself. I've morphed all along. So I've been speaking different languages as I've gone throughout my ages. But I think what it has done is it's helped me get like a real spectrum of experiences, and I can not relate, but I can understand to a certain extent what they're talking about, what they're going through. It may be different, but it's just it's the same. It's
the shared universal
yeah.
experience.
It is the same.
Yeah.
So I try my best. Like I said, I think the number one thing that I've learned is this is very painful, in a sense where you are not going to stop this tide.
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be Moses.
Yeah.
None of us are gonna be Moses. I think all you can do is maybe like keep it. I mean, but want it to get that trickle rather than a wave. I think that's what I'm always trying to work on.
Yeah.
And that's the difficult thing to do, is try and almost take yourself out of it and then keep yourself in it enough where you're not pushing your agenda or pushing yourself on them, but you're almost just like, look, I'm here. I'm going to be right here, even if you get nicked on a Saturday night, I'm going to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I've only got 2 really loose rules, I'll say. And the number one thing is do not get in a situation where you have to use any form of excessive violence, or you end somebody. Yeah.
Tough rule.
That's yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. No, I just say that because it's just so frequent.
Yeah.
Sadly. It's funny. Like I had this thing with a lot of my young people all along my career, where I get to know this version of them, because they're always children that potentially no one else knows, because their armour as soon as they step outside is so intense, like a soldier. On the streets of London, young people who are involved refer to people who aren't involved as civilians, so by default they consider themselves soldiers. And they're at this point in their lives, they're violent young people. they do robberies. They're potentially willing to take someone else's child's life. They have very, very little regard for anyone but themselves, their pack, sometimes not even their pack. And yet, when the real blessing and luxury about our jobs is that you get these moments with them if you built that relationship one-on-one where they drop all of that and they're a child. Yeah. And there's this intense paradox between the kid that you're taking out for food and, you know, who's has all those mannerisms of a kid where they're getting shy or they're smiling, and then later that evening they've got a 22-inch blade down their tracksuit and they're ready to use it.
But I think that's interesting. I've been very fortunate. I've lost a few along the way, but I've been very, very fortunate with a few of them. They've gone on to do quite well. And one of the young mentees was a young man, gentleman called Aaron. He's in his 20s now, and he's like very shy, very insular with himself. There was a barrier there, and it took a long time of just talking and just being around. And we kind of connected over boxing. He's a boxing fanatic, and I always think that if there is a thing, it doesn't have to be their career, but if there's a thing that they connect with, is football, boxing, chess, whatever it is, if you can meet them there and just like you said, take
the world goes away.
Yeah, the world goes away. Yeah. And take them out of because when you do look at it as much as you see a young man in front of you, most of us ourselves, you know, we're always trying to find that little kid in us that somehow, somewhere along the way got damaged or wasn't hugged enough. Or there's always, even us as grown, as adults, we've got
absolutely
a little kid who wants something.
Maybe what you seek in your partner, what you seek in your relationship.
So when you look at them, you sit in the room, you talk with them, you're like, oh, do you know what? He's just he's a child. He's a child, yeah. And I think I haven't experienced Glasgow or I'm mostly in London, and I think there is a thing of young men of like migrant backgrounds who have that kind of rush to become this sort of whatever their interpretation of what masculine is.
Yeah.
I think that is something that we need to challenge.
Yeah.
What the idea of what is masculine, what is a man, what does it mean to grow, and I don't think they get enough of that.
I did a football tournament. A group of my boys, we did a football tournament just last week where we were representing QPR, and it was a Premier League outreach tournament, and we won. And so we're playing the national finals at St George's Park, England's training ground, against all the other winners. Amazing day, because they're incredible footballers. Anyway, as part of the day, we didn't actually know this, but there was a couple of workshops, which when we got there, me and my colleague at QPR saw, we were sort of, our hearts slightly sank from a selfish perspective, because getting these lot to take part in workshops is notoriously difficult due to the challenges regulating. And two of the workshops were run by police. And those nosedived. I can imagine. But one of the workshops was run by some Brentford sort of coaches do mental health with kids, and they did a couple of exercises, and this one was better. The boys engaged better with this, and one of the questions was basically they did this exercise where they'd ask a question and you'd move over one side of the room depending on yes or no. So they started off PlayStation or Xbox, blah 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 blah. And they asked, is it okay for men to cry? And they all went to no. They all walked over to no. And you just think, like, it's kind of unsurprising, but then it's also like, you think in 2024, you just think, given how open and consistent the conversation about mental health is in schools. The message is everywhere, right? And yet they didn't miss a beat. Now they were all together, so you have to factor in the fact that they're, you know, if you'd asked them individually,
I think sometimes
there would have been different answers.
There is that. Who's gonna be the Indian over the hill?
Of course.
Who's gonna actually stand up and say?
But I also know, because I know them all individually, that several of them fully believe that it's not okay to cry. Yeah. To cry.
Yeah. And how old are they?
They're 16.
Yeah. That's I would not be crying.
Yeah.
I would not.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's something that it's gonna sound funny, not in a funny way, but I started crying late in life, like later in life, so comfortable actually just being upset and crying over things.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think the conversation is even a broader one. Just how these young men understand what being a man is and what is portrayed to them as being a man. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes it can be almost like a speeded up process of, I mean, 15-year-old kid, they're children at 15 and 16, but they're seen outsiders, I guess, as adults, as intimidating, as a threat, you know. And sometimes some of them lean into that. Sometimes it is put on them. So it's difficult, because I would not, and I believe it. 16, 17, 18, 20s, I'm crying. Like, men don't cry. I'm not crying for. So I mean, it's difficult to be vulnerable, because that vulnerability in certain circumstances can be a downfall, can be literally a life and death sort of thing to hold within yourself. So I think it's almost sometimes, I think, getting them away from that environment and maybe placing them somewhere else.
Has to be.
That, I think, is sometimes a trick, because that's, you know, when let's say me and I would just be in the gym. Sometimes on a Saturday, lock ourselves in the gym, just train. By the time he's knackered, he's tired. Get some food, eat, he's gone home. He's not around. He's becoming his own individual. I think sometimes you might have to take one out of the
Definitely.
Because what could happen is,
because pack mentality is toxic.
But it's also is a contagion.
Yeah.
So there's indoctrination can be both negative and positive.
100%.
A contagion can be both negative and positive. Now, if you take out somebody who you kind of spot to be maybe a bit of a leader, maybe a bit of, he's got a bit of sway, you take him out.
Spot on.
Take him out, move him around a little bit, get to kind of try to break the ice with him.
Yeah.
You put him back in.
Yeah.
He's going to become a contagion, but it's a contagion for positive and good.
Yeah.
And that's because we all want to be part of a group. We all want to be accepted.
Yeah. And you always have to bring yourself back down to your level of the adolescent mind.
Yeah.
And you cannot have unrealistic expectations. But you couldn't have hit the nail on the head more. That's it. You find that one, usually a group leader, but one who has the ability to self-reflect. I think is such an important thing. I think
throughout I was very fortunate. You know, I remember I was made a school prefect, and it wasn't because I was the best behaved. They just said, look, if we make him a prefect, it's going to give him a sense of responsibility. It's going to make him actually behave better. Because prefects were the ones that were well behaved on school. I was always late for school, and I was always, getting into fights and stuff. I was a smart kid academically. I was also just I used to fight a lot in school. So them making me a prefect actually gave me a sense of, oh wow, I'm a prefect. It started to change my behaviour. So I started to be able to become an influence, like a positive influence. Do you know what I mean? So I think sometimes that slight reward, that slight attention, a bit more attention, and a bit more of a sense of, you are okay. If you're a leader, what does that mean to you? What are you trying to lead them to do? What are your leadership? You got leadership skills? Okay, cool. Well, can you stop them from thinking like this? Can you stop them doing that? Because it's better from them than it is from us. Because I think as much as you think, oh, you know what, we listen to the same music, or we might dress the same, or we might have some sort of social connections, there's still that distance between us. There's that generational distance, and there should be. Because language changes. And you trying to keep up. And you trying to keep up with them. It sounds a bit weird. I mean, as a 43-year-old, what? It sounds weird. Whereas if you can have that one-on-one conversation with that one, you can make a contagion for good. He then does your work. He builds that bridge for you.
100%.
So it's
I think one of the kind of last topics of conversation I want to touch on is like the mentality of doing this line of work for yourself. Kind of dropped it in conversation a few times that you have to be crazy to do this line of work. And that's just what I say. And that's obviously a personal thing. Do you know what I mean? I'm talking about myself. But you know, I really do, compared to other people in terms of the speed at which my brain operates. I have ADHD. You know, like I've always been a very, very fast operator mentally. And I don't know how to operate any other way. And that makes me highly, highly effective at my job because I can juggle many, many things and just, you know, cut through things at a speed which other people can't. But it also comes at a cost, you know, a cost that's led me to having some unhealthy outlets throughout my life, no doubt about it. And so I often will have days where I've done and seen insane things. And I think in my head I'm often of like, if you stick a GoPro on me, people would just think you're crazy. That's what I think. That's the internal conversation I have about myself.
Where do you then find your peace then?
I think that's an ongoing journey for me. I think I'm better than I was. I think there were points in my life a couple of years ago, definitely, when I had to have a serious conversation with myself about, if you're going to do this, can you handle it? And I think I find my peace in my relationships, my friendships, my family, obviously, and, you know, really, like, for me, I think I'm happiest when I get the chance to get out of the country, to travel, to do those things, to step out of Gotham City. So I think that's where I find my peace, and so I'm always kind of trying to cook up plans in my head on how to do that. But I was gonna put the question to you, as obviously a slightly older man, of how you deal with.
Do you know? I think how I deal with it is an ongoing process.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing I had to learn for myself is that this, it's going to sound weird, I'm going to say, is it's going to understand this is not going to be successful. And what I mean by that is it's a forever process. Like young men, so I deal with mostly young men, have always had a propensity for violence just because of their testosterone levels, and they've always had a propensity for being in groups since, you know, Peaky Blinders and beyond that. It's just a thing that we have to be around each other. So we are going to step out of the way for someone to step in, and I make peace with that. I can't save the world. You know, I can only try and reach, even if it's one person at a time, I'll be happy with that. I think once you kind of retract your ego out of this situation, you know, like, it's not about you. And it's not about you making it. I know that this is not going to be a success, but my success is measured differently. Like one person at a time. That's what I find. And just little wins, small little wins. And away from that, is just training. You know, I'm fortunate enough to, you know, boxing, jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is something where I really find I just relax. That's why I just go to relax, and it's something I wish we could introduce into schools, because for me anyway, my experience, you do find a real peace when someone is trying to literally kill you or break your arm or strangle you. It sounds weird, but because there's nothing like being in a moment. You're not anywhere else. You can't think about anything else apart from those 5 minutes. I'm gonna survive, or I'm gonna survive, or I'm gonna not beat your opponent. So there's no winning or losing especially if you're like having a role. It's just you're working things out in your head, but it's so intense. You can't leave that moment, so you don't think about anything else.
And I think when you find comfortability in intensity, that's it. And I certainly have that, like, where my struggles are when the intensity is kind of turned off.
Yeah.
But I remember a couple of years ago, I went and saw a therapist because I thought I was, kind of starting to lose the plot a little bit. And I remember saying to her, I was like, an analogy I used was, I was like, I'm a train, and I'm going at 150 miles an hour, and I'm a good train. The passengers, they get onto me, they get to their destination, they get well looked after on the service, they get off, but the train keeps going. And I know that the mechanics of the railway line and the train itself cannot go at that speed forever. But the train doesn't know how to slow down. And when it slows down, it feels like he starts to shake. Yeah. But in reality, if he flies off the rail at 150 miles an hour, it's going to be ugly. Yeah. And so it's about finding that balance of being comfortable with an intensity and your outlets being an intensity, but then also being comfortable with peace and quiet and silence a bit more, which are healthy things,
Yeah.
And that's definitely the goal for me, and I am definitely approaching that, or at least getting better at it, I think, so yeah.
Good.
All right.
Yeah, good.